always had a special place in my heart. Now, my father was a priest, and I grew up, and someday I'll give a talk on this. There are two sources for this order of services in the Orthodox Church. The Order of Jerusalem and the Order of Services of Hagia Sophia. And in the Order of Jerusalem, the canon of St. Angelo Creed is divided into 4 parts. For the first week of Great Lent, Monday through Thursday, and they serve it with a great compline, which if you serve the great compline according to the books, takes almost 2 hours to serve. It takes about, depending upon how quickly the priest reads, it takes anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour to read the first part of the canon, section of the canon. So I was growing up, I was in church for almost 3 hours in the evening. Here I am, 6 years old. Services are in Slavonic. And again, Slavonic was never a spoken language. It was attempted Esperanto back in the 9th century. They took words from various Slavic tribes. So the Russians, if they take it today, oh, I understand the service in Slavonic, baloney. Because I will give you examples. I'll give you one. Commemorating our most holy and pure blessed, and all of our life unto Christ our God. In Slavonic is Ivech Život naš. Christu Bogu predadim. Život today in Russian means stomach. 1,000 years ago it meant life. So the language never evolved. So all I remember is the service would be going on, and suddenly I would hear my father come out and start in Slavonic, Gospodi Vladiko Životamego, O Lord and Master of my life. And that meant we had about 5 more minutes to the service, and I rejoiced. Well, unfortunately, that stayed with me for many years, and it wasn't until I really went to the seminary, to St. Stephen's, that I started to meditate on the prayer of St. Ephraim. And the prayer begins with a challenge. O Lord and Master of my life. Who is the Lord and Master of my life? That's the first thing that came to mind when I started to think about it. Am I the Lord and Master of my life? My family the Lord and Master of my life? Where I'm employed, is that the Master of my life? Or is God the Lord and Master of my life? So it begins with a challenge for us. Who is the Lord and Master of our life? And then it begins 4, if you will, negative approaches to life. Take from me the spirit of sloth, despair, lust of power, and idle talk. First, sloth. What is sloth? We say laziness. But it goes a little beyond there. Sloth is this whole attitude where I don't give a darn. Do what you want. Chris, you want to do that? Go ahead. As long as it doesn't bother me, I don't care. I don't care about anyone. I don't care about what anyone does. I don't even care if I'm happy, if I'm sad. I just want to go from day to day. And from sloth, what happens? Despair sets in. And then I get discouraged. And then I start questioning, does God exist? Why me, God? I don't even believe in God, which is, to a certain degree, spiritual sacrifice, and spiritual suicide. And then despair can push us even farther, or we face physical suicide. So we go from an I don't care attitude to a total destructive attitude. Lust of power. So I can fight it one way. And that's by taking control of my life. And how many times do we hear this in this day and age? You have to take control of your life. So I take control of my life. And you better stay out of my life, Marty, or I'll put you in your place. This is the approach we take. And that's what control of our life is. And then finally, idle talk. Now, Bob and I get together, and we're going to chat about everybody here in this room, and all of your shortcomings, and really that's not a sin. I'm just taking up some time. I've got 15 minutes to waste, so let me just pass the time of day with God. So again, we enter into a negative approach to our life. And when we stop and think of that, the first thing this prayer does, as I said, is challenge not only who God is, but it challenges our life. And we have to stop and think, where am I in my life? How do I behave? Where do these four elements come into my life? Sloth is considered by the fathers of the church to be the basis of all sin. So we're playing with something very dangerous. And then we have a second approach. Forgive rather the spirit of chastity. Now, we define chastity nowadays as sexual propriety. But chastity is not that. It's greater than that. Chastity is a life that is pure. Not sinless, but pure. So, giving me the spirit of chastity is the complete opposite of slothfulness. So we start going to the opposites. Give me a life of chastity, humility. That's the complete opposite of despair. We can be humble, but we don't despair. We can be humble, but very happy. We can be humble, and we have faith. In the spirit, I have to go through the prayer. Chastity, patience, and love. Patience, again, that I love my fellow man. And because I love my fellow man and my fellow woman, whatever they do, I'm not going to stand there and criticize them. I'm not going to enter into this feeling of control. Rather, I'll pray for them. I'll ask God to guide this person. And in doing that, I develop love for my brothers and sisters. And in this love, again, I turn and try to help people. There's only one problem with this. It can develop into a very serious sin. And who knows what that is? Who said it? Somebody said pride. Exactly. So, that's why we have to look at our own sins and not to judge our brothers. Because if we look at our own sins, we realize that we have nothing to be proud of. We have love, patience, endurance. We try to help people, but we try to do it either anonymously or we don't develop pride. And when we don't have pride, then we have love for other people. The prayer is very well described. I don't know how many of you have read Great Lent by Father Alexander Schmemann. But he breaks down this prayer and points out that really the prayer shows the essence of Great Lent. And this is what I feel when I hear this prayer. For me, yeah, Great Lent technically started last Sunday with the Perkimenon, turn not away thy face from thy servant. And I guess technically, I'll accept the start of Great Lent there, yes. But really, for me, Great Lent starts when I hear this prayer. Because it's a challenge for me. It's a challenge for me to prepare for my going to confession. It's a challenge for me to prepare every day of Great Lent. The services for the first 3 weeks of Great Lent have one theme, and one theme only, and that is rejoice. Lent is at hand. And we don't think of Lent as a joyful time. You know, we have to give up foods, we come to church more, some people give up activities, and we look upon it sometimes as being a very difficult time. I remember, oh boy, this happened about 40 years ago. I was on a parish, and unfortunately, in that parish, the people didn't fast during Lent. They maybe fasted on Friday, but as far as fasting all Lent, they didn't do it. So, of course, yours truly gave sermons and really got on their backs and all. And this one young boy was 16 years old, and he came to me, and he said, Father, this year I'm going to fast strictly. So I looked at him, and I said, you know, you have to be careful. Your family doesn't fast. Why don't you fast Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays? No, I'm going to fast strictly. 5th week of Great Lent, he comes to me and says, Father, there are X number of days, X number of hours, X number of minutes before I can have a ham sandwich. So I said, okay, Joey, come on with me. We hopped in the car and I drove to McDonald's and bought my hamburger and told him, eat it, because you're not fasting. The minute you start counting how many days before the fast ends, you're not fasting. But this is what this prayer does. It instills in us the need to abstain, not only from food, but from evil deeds. It instills in us the need to help others, to have love toward others. It instills in us the realization that there is more to life than me, myself, and I. And that's why I really like this prayer. At the Kiev Cave Monastery in Kiev, Ukraine, they recite this prayer during the pre-Christmas fast also, because they feel it's so important. And I do that at home. But it's a prayer really that we can, the fact that it's recited during Great Lent is fine, but if a person wants, they can recite it every day of their life to help them get focused on their life, on changes that they have to do in their lives, and on growing in their faith in God. Any questions? Yes, please.
Yeah, you're mentioning sloth. And it reminded me of the parable of the talents, where the guy went and buried his talents, and God called him lazy and wicked. But what he said was, I was afraid. So there's fear. He sensed fear, but God called him lazy and wicked. And that's the last thing I want, because I get afraid a lot. The last thing I wanted to be called lazy and wicked, but then I realized, well, maybe there's laziness in me. There's a relationship between that we can recognize between our fear and really being lazy, and then attack it with the antidote you were mentioning.
Well, fear, of course, will then come in despair, because a sloth would lead to despair. We're afraid of life. We're afraid to try to express ourselves. We're afraid to try to assert ourselves. So there is a relationship between fear and sloth. Yes. Yes, please.
I wondered why the OCA does the Great Canon of St. Andrew Creed that first week in Lent, and we don't have much exposure to it in the Greek church. Do you know why is that?
Yeah, that's because, as I said in the beginning, there are two sources for the services. The source of the Church of Jerusalem, which is St. Solace Monastery, and the source of the Studio Monastery, which was the order services at Hagia Sophia. So the Church of Jerusalem, in about the 9th century, 10th century, they read the canon in 4 parts during the first 4 days of Great Lent. And being coming from a monastery, that's why they did it with the great complex. While the Hagia Sophia never took that approach.
Thank you.
And you know, it's you figure one source, the source of the Church of Jerusalem is very monastic, while the source of Hagia Sophia was parish-oriented. So it's a little more realistic at the parish level. You know, you don't. What I did with taking the Great Canon, I finally did it with the Lesser Count line, because at least the Lesser Count line, the people can be through in under an hour. You don't have them in church for almost 3 hours. The person works from 9 to 5 and then comes to church and goes to church from 7 until 10 or 6:30 until 9:30. How much is that person concentrating on what's going on? And how much is it, you know, or like I was. I guess that's why I did that, because as a youngster, I just couldn't wait for the prayer of St. Ephraim, because that meant there was about 5 minutes left in the service.
But I love the Great Canon of St. Andrew Creek, that was when I first started coming to the Orthodox Church, when I wasn't even Orthodox yet, I heard that, and it just reversed. I had been going to a Protestant, taking classes from a Protestant seminary that was very liberal, and a lot of feminist theology was floating around, not just floating around, we were studying and reading these books and everything. And I heard the Great Canon, and it just totally reversed everything for me. And I realized that I had a totally wrong understanding on a whole lot of things. So,
oh yeah, it's an eye-opener
for it.
Yes, it's an eye-opener. And that's why I happen to like it, because again, there are 175 verses. And when you read them in one service, again, it's a little difficult to concentrate. When it's broken down into 4 parts, and it takes about, as I said, depending about how quickly the priest reads it, but it takes 45 minutes to an hour, you can concentrate more on what's going on. So yeah, I agree with you. I think the canon is a very wonderful canon. You know, St. Andrew, you know why he wrote that canon? He wrote it for himself, for his own meditation. And his secretary, who was copying it, was so impressed by it that he made 2 copies and he gave it to someone else. Wow. And it just started to spread through Crete, and then it just went out of there and other places, and people were just so impressed with it. But he never wrote it with the intention of it being used liturgically. It's supposed to be for his own meditation during the Great Lent. Yes?
You talked about despair and humility being kind of opposites. Can you give an illustration?
Yeah, when you have humility, you realize, or what you want to avoid is things that take you away from God. You want to go closer to God. Saint Piedmont the Great, if I remember correctly, passed the remark that flee from anyone that praises you. And you want to do that. You want to stay away from praise. You want to stay away from things that will slowly build a wall between you and God. While sloth is just the opposite. You really don't care. You're not going to make the effort to change. And if a wall begins to build between you and God, so it builds so much. I still can live. I know how to live my life. I had an email about a month and a half ago from a young man. He's in graduate school. I had baptized him, and he started it by saying, "I don't like the Bible. There are things in the Bible I don't agree with. I don't like the book of Leviticus, and what I've decided to do is I don't need God in my life. I can choose what is good, and I can choose what is bad on my own, and I interpret the Bible as I see fit." And he just went on and on and on. That is an example of sloth. I do everything. I, myself, and I. Yeah.
Well, Vadim, so I heard once that humility is not only resisting the praise side, but also resisting the accusations of the enemy about you that would try to bring you down. So humility is trusting God's word about you.
Yeah, it's total trust in God.
God loves you,
Right.
and His path for you is good, and then He is creating you for good things. Then that can lift you out of despair because you're accepting that. And that's
Right.
You're taking the position of humility to accept what God says about you, not your own self-accusation.
Yeah. Any other questions? No, we never hesitate to ask questions. I think I told this story a couple of years ago. There was a scientist that gave a lecture, and when he finished, he asked for questions, and nobody asked any questions, and he sat there. Finally, one person raised their hand and said, "Sir, you're more brilliant than Einstein." When Einstein presented his theory of relativity, 4 people understood. You, nobody understood. So please, never hesitate with the question.
It's fun sort of, talking about the words, because I think we say some law, they hard use lots of power and all that. It's really easy to say, well, I don't really know, or we think about them on a very superficial level.
Yeah.
We think I'm not lazy because I'm working every day and I'm not sitting around, how would you remind yourself when you're in that moment to say those words, what they really mean?
Yeah, well, you start with the first, the beginning, O Lord and Master of my life. And then you ask, is God the Lord and Master of my life? Do I pray? Do I try to help others? Do I try to lead a Christian life? Do I sit back and relax too much? Do I wake up on a Sunday morning and say, oh, well, I went to church last Sunday, I'll skip going to church. Why should I go to church very often? Every time I go to church, the priest says the same thing, Christ is risen. Why go to church? These are the type of things that creep in. And actually, it's Satan who's introducing these ideas into our head to try to keep us away from church. And that's one of the criteria. What I am doing, is that really within the teachings of Christ, or are they opposite to the teaching of Christ? And that's why it's important, especially here during Great Lent, that we actually examine our life. We should do that almost daily, the Father said. But of course, some people don't, we can't, we're busy, etc. But then at least weekly, before we go to liturgy on Sunday, Saturday night, sit down and question. I question myself. What is my life like? How have I strayed? Or if I move closer to God, that's where the humility comes in. Because you say, I'm unworthy, it's God's will, and I accept God's will, and it isn't anything that I did. So these are ways in which you can try to overcome sloth. Okay, next week, Father Tom asked me to do it next week. What I'm going to do is talk, and if you would please this week, look up the the Gospels for the 5 Sundays of Great Lent. And then I'll comment on the scripture, how they're actually connected. We read them and we don't really think that they're connected, but if you look at it and analyze it, they are connected. So that's what I'll talk about next week. Okay?
Thank you, Father.
Thank you very much.